the big X's in the trees.
It's like doing a great presentation.
Like these, they're on top of that. Sewer lateral, and there's no way to actually do that curb line replacement and get in there without losing the but on that other section,
Just like school, you need a choice.
the whole way.
I'm very interested in that.
I'm going to start by Shakespeare. I'm hoping you get next.
Thank you.
All right. We'll call the meeting to order here. Thank everybody for coming out. I appreciate it. I hope you've had a minute to take a look at the plans. I hope you had a minute or two to review the plans we mailed out, as well as the arborist report. Obviously, we want to push forward with this. The administration wants to push forward with this. They see this as, correct me if I'm wrong, behind the two emergencies we just dealt with, this being the #1 project in terms of the sewer infrastructure that we need to address. Okay, so I'm in favor of it. It seems like the rest of the board's in favor of it. Of course, who knows with us anymore, but it seems like they are the last time we spoke about it. So the issue is how to pay for it. So that's #1. The funds in our sewer fee, we don't have the funds in our sewer account to pay for it right now. All right, so it looks like what the staff is going to propose, what I'm going to support is raising the fee about $1.10 per 1,000 gallons used. It's currently $5.90 per 1,000 gallons used, and we want to raise it up to $7. That will generate several $million dollars, I believe is the math on it, which could take care of this project and others that we have to do throughout the township. So the other question is, if we do it, who's paying for the laterals? How are we doing that? That's a decision for the board as well, whether we want to spend $800,000 on this, up to 1.1, I think, is with the laterals. So that's a decision for us to make.
I need to define laterals, please.
Laterals, the connection from the sewer in the street to your house, okay? So we obviously, I don't want to have a new sewer system connected with 130-year-old laterals, okay? Now, I think the township should pay for that as part of raising the fee. I think we should cover that. I think there's support for that, I'm not sure. That's a decision for us to make on the board, but that's what I'm suggesting, that's what I'm going to push for. That's what I believe we should do. I don't think we should leave the laterals on the homeowners financially and just out of principle, because they are old. I don't believe we've taken care of our infrastructure properly over the years. And frankly, if it were me, I wouldn't have the money to pay for a new lateral right now. So I can understand where people are coming from. I think we should do it. That's what I would push for as part of raising the fee. All right, so that's where we are. The budgeting process is coming up. The next time we're going to discuss this, I think we're setting a special meeting for November 6th, where we're going to discuss the budget. So tune in, where we will be discussing the fee. That will be one of our issues to deal with, and we'll see what kind of support's there. Obviously, I'll let everybody know beforehand, and coming out and telling us about why this is needed always helps. So if you can come out, I appreciate it. Obviously, I'll let everybody know what's going on beforehand. All right. So with that, I'll turn it over to the experts. This is Steve Norsini, our township engineer. He basically runs the show, and he's got a little insight into the arborist report as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I'd like to introduce, you may remember, this is Roger Phillips from Gannett Fleming. So Gannett Fleming is the company we use for many projects, and they were the designer on this, and Roger is the lead. So just a brief history. Chagrin Valley Engineers in 2011 did a township-wide stormwater report. One of the projects they noted in that report was Midland Avenue. And the reason it connected with sanitary sewer, no pun intended, was stormwater through inflow and infiltration gets in the sanitary sewer, and it backs up in some residents' houses. And we also have the levitating manholes that you see floating, which is not normal, and it's not the way it's supposed to be. So Commissioner Clark was aware of this report, and he's looking to see if, if this was a project we should do. So if you remember, we met earlier in the year, and similar situation, an open house type thing with Roger, myself, the commissioner. And in order for him to make an informed decision, he wants to hear from the residents. So at the last meeting, staff and the commissioner heard loud and clear. Everybody was very concerned about the loss of trees, and that was very evident. So we charged Gannett Fleming with coming up with a plan that altered that to try to save the trees. Now the issue with the other plan was we were replacing the sanitary sewer exactly in the same spot, And on one of the blocks, that exact spot ran under the trees. So this sanitary sewer is 100 years old. You know, Commissioner Clark had mentioned our budget. So I was charged with coming together with a list, and you'll see this as one of the projects. The number I used is greater than what Commissioner Clark noted, because I'm allowing for contingency and what ifs if we go certain ways on this project. So the commissioner very much wants to hear what the folks in the neighborhood have to say, because the impact is on you. The end product is good for everybody, yourselves included, but the project is in your streets. So what we have here tonight is a set of plans, 2 sets. So it starts with the green page and it comes around this way, and then here's another set and comes around this way. So the basic project runs Midland Avenue from Luella to St. David's. So in the first block, where we go from Midland, we're heading east, right? That sewer line would be replaced. We're proposing to replace it where it is now, because it's already out in the street. So the damage to the trees, we're not digging up all the trees. The spot where it gets moved out is, pardon me, I'm going to go back to my notes. As we're heading eastward from Aberdeen eastward to Pembroke, the line gets moved northward out of the tree line. So also, Commissioner and staff heard your concerns about the trees. So I had the arborist go out and I asked him to give us a property by property description of every tree that could be impacted by the project, the species of the tree, the size of the tree, the impact, and any follow-up mitigation. And that was sent to you, but we have copies here, and I could also go through that. Unfortunately, the arborist could not be here tonight, but hopefully I can provide you insight into his methodology.
And if I can add to that, that report has not been fully integrated onto these plans yet. This is where the trees are, and everything here is based on what our surveyor looked at a few years ago when this started. We're gonna be incorporating John Hochbeck's final report into these plans. So if you look at your property and you say, you know, hey, the report doesn't jive up with what you see on the plans, that's kind of why. That'll be updated.
Yeah, and if I can, and we're also planning, there will be another meeting once that's all done. I mean, this is not the final meeting on this or anything like that. There will be another one on this.
So for your sake, when you're talking about trees, the report would dictate. And I do want to note that if the project comes to fruition, I want everybody to fully understand, we will sit with each resident, go over the trees, and based on our shade tree ordinance, if, let's say, you know, a tree was removed, we would go to that ordinance and work with the resident on, here's what a compensatory planning for that would be. We would sit with our arborist, who's very knowledgeable as far as the species and size of trees, and work out within the list of the ordinance what tree would be amenable to the resident. And that would all have to be worked out ahead of time, because that would all go in the bid package when it was said and done. And a couple other things. So the Commissioner already talked about it. There's a few to be determined items. One are the laterals, and to this gentleman's concern, the lateral is your soil pipe. So your dishwasher, your bathtub, your toilets, whatever, there's a pipe that exits your house with that waste and goes to the sanitary sewer main. So what we're talking about here, we call the sanitary sewer main. The township owns, operates, and maintains that. 10, 11 years ago, the ordinance changed, and the homeowner, the resident, the property owner, owns that lateral from the house through its connection in township's main. So I concur with Commissioner Clark from an engineering standpoint. If this amount of money is going to be spent to basically upgrade, repair, and tighten the system, it would make good sense to replace those 100-year-old laterals. They're all vitrified clay or terracotta, unless somebody's replaced it, you know, more recently. Part of the problem here we get is inflow and infiltration. That's where water, not wastewater, either comes over land into the system through a vent pipe, or pipes that are no longer airtight and sealed take in groundwater. So the main project, the replacing of the main, will take care of a lot of that, but that doesn't address the laterals. So the reason my price in the budget is higher than what the Commissioner noted was, if we do the laterals and if we pay for it, and again, that's not my decision, that's a board decision, but I wanted to show magnitude. There's a lot of things to consider. How that lateral comes out of your house. What does it run under? Is it under a tree, bushes, sidewalks, pathways? You know, they went in decades, 8 decades, 9 decades ago. So over that time, the residents, long before you folks, you know, prettied up their house with various shrubs and amenities. So they would be disturbed. And if they're disturbed, what goes back? So that's why there's a price there. There's another issue with the laterals. There is the stone arch culvert. There's a stormwater culvert that runs down the street. Some areas it's behind the houses, but a lot of it, like by St. Catherine's, it's in the street. It goes under St. Catherine's, actually. And depending on the work we do, some of the work would take us through that culvert. And that culvert's old, definitely older than any of us in this room. And there will be expense in trying to repair that. So the way this is set up, the way I set it up is, if you look on each plan, it says continued on sheet 4. This is sheet 4. So you would move in a clockwise direction, starting at the green area map, and that would take you to here. This is another set that comes around, counterclockwise. Yeah. So Roger and myself are here. It's a note. The commissioner wanted it to be very interactive, so it's an open house format. Come up, look at the plans, ask us any questions. I spoke to the arborist. He was away for the past week in Montana, and he's flying back tonight, so he is not here. But I can comment on his methodology. I'm no arborist by any chance. I'm an engineer, so I rely on him to tell us what trees are good, bad, and need to come down or don't need to come down. While I'm on that, in that report, there's some trees noted as hazard, okay? They're in the right-of-way. The township does address those trees. I didn't want to do anything until we spoke, but those types of trees are what we, the township, would remove, okay, and grind out that stump. So maybe at the end of this meeting, if your property has a tree listed as hazard, if you would talk to me, I would put Mark Dominic. He's in our Public Works Department. He runs parks. His job is to get these trees removed. So I would get in touch with him and say, hey, look, Mark, here's the report. I've talked to the residents. Let's have these trees removed before they cause a problem. And that's independent of this project. That just so happens, because he evaluated these trees, we know of this concern. So I guess really at this point, please, if you have any questions, come on up. Roger and I are here to take you through these plans and hopefully answer any concerns you have. Mrs. Stern.
Steve, 3 kind of quick questions. Is there any technology that would allow you from the main to basically put a sleeve inside the existing terracotta lateral to the houses? That's
what's going to be used. So on the Wella proper, from Windermere to Route 30, you see Roger's note, sanitary sewer rehabilitation by CIPP. That's cured in place pipe. That's where there's a resin impregnated fiberglass sleeve, which is run through the pipe, and it's cured with hot water, if you will. They do make products like that for laterals, but they are not as effective for a couple of reasons. Laterals, so the pipes we're working with, for the most part, are straight. They're of a larger diameter and they're straight. A lateral leaving a house can have many twists and turns.
Okay.
And in those twists and turns, that fiberglass, like a sock, does not fit smoothly. It bunches up. So it is a process. It can be used. I would not recommend it. For the magnitude of cost that we're spending to replace this line, if the board saw fit to address the laterals, where possible, I think we should go the old-fashioned way, replace it. That's the best product for you, and I think it's the best product for the township.
All right, so 2 other quick questions. If we had a question about a particular tree, is it possible for this tree eye to come out on a designated date so homeowners could perhaps, so some of these houses are saying fair or poor or good or whatever. I mean, would we be available to, on a date to come out? And because maybe there's some more, I don't happen to be on that side of the street, but a neighbor asked me to ask this. you know, if they did a little bit of work on their tree, it would put it in better shape, or if the township did it, put it in better shape in preparation for this project to increase the likelihood that we don't lose trees that are just being monitored.
Absolutely. So I think that's a great point, and the best way to address that would be, once he's back and once everybody's had a chance to soak all this up, I could pick a date and we could do it in the evening when folks are home from work. It's a little tougher now because it gets dark earlier, but or we could try to do it late afternoon. And I could say, John, look, you know, there's 8 residents that want to meet with you. Can you go through why this tree is considered fair, poor, good, hazard, whatever it may be? And you see on his report, he notes a lot of the mitigation is observation on his part. And it doesn't just end at observation. So the monitoring means he would be there during construction, and as the crew excavated and installed pipe, you know, he might have them root prune. He might have them do some type of feeding. He would. That's another reason we need a contingency, because we don't know what that would be. But that's a pretty standard. So I'm the liaison to the Shade Tree Commission, which is tomorrow night if anybody's interested. Not a big seller. But so a lot of times when the contractors come in and they're doing work near trees, and really it's impractical to ask somebody, hey, can you flip your garage over because we don't want you near that tree. So even though it might not impose directly on the tree, I'll have them put the note that they will root prune, which basically means clean cutting the roots when they're exposed, and maybe do a deep root feeding to help that tree along. And that's something that can be built into this program also.
Okay, two quick, because I missed that other meeting. Are you going to camera each lateral or not? You're just going to assume that they need to be replaced?
Yeah, and I know some folks over time have replaced their laterals, and we could address that. But the assumption is if it's a vitrified clay or terracotta, you know, remember folks, the terracotta of this pipe is like the terracotta vases you buy. It is clay, and a little different in density and thickness, but that's what it is. So the assumption is they're not in good shape. Another other part of the problems is folks' risers may be low, so when we get those big storms, water goes in there. And we have in our ordinance how high they're supposed to be, but I wouldn't anticipate. I think the cost to televise every lateral would be better spent. My recommendation to the commissioners, to the manager, would be to put that towards the project in whatever fashion that is.
Thanks, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Steve, Roger, first of all, I mean, from an appeal standpoint, the change you made in the plan is huge. I mean, before you were looking at costs and you were replacing that main, but it was wiping out
30 trees.
an enormous amount of trees. So thank you very much for listening on that front. So I have a couple questions. The total, why are we replacing the sewer line is number one.
I'll answer that as you start. So the impetus was the Chagrin Valley 2011 report. But if you look, when the budget comes out, I have a 10-year, I was asked to do a 10-year project plan for sanitary sewer. So we have some real immediate needs. You may know we spent a lot of money on a couple of emergency projects. One is the King of Prussia Road force main, roughly a $2 million project. We have another one in the Skunk Hollow Park, the Skunk Hollow trunk main. We found another one off of Rolls Run Lane that I asked Rogers firm to give us a price for while we were there. We found another one. So this, to get back to that, this project, you'll see listed in that budget was our biggest problem areas are North and South Wayne. They're the most beautiful, well, one of the most beautiful parts, I guess it's all the eye of the beholder, the most beautiful parts of the township because of the beauty of these older homes. But the infrastructure is just as old. And so we have two things. We have
but
people
your
that
stormwater is leaking. The stormwater was leaking.
Well,
or no, the sewer line's leaking. The INI, there's an INI report that shows
right. So there's
that's water entering the sanitary sewer.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
So we have water that comes in through manholes, vents, and yards. Right. That's the inflow. And then we have the infiltration, where you have an old pipe that's in the ground, and when groundwater is high enough, that old pipe.
So the natural water is back in the sewer,
right?
And it's floating in the
couple problems. Some folks get their houses flooded, and also we, as a township, we pay by the gallon for our sanitary sewer to be treated. So that rainwater should not be going to sanitary sewer. We're paying for that.
Then my follow-up question, on the sewer rate increase, is that township wide?
If that's
The
passed,
sewer
that's
fee.
township wide.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the rental fee that everybody has to pay.
Right. So that makes sense, because although the sewer lines are running down Midland, it's also carrying sewer from elsewhere. So that,
Yeah, exactly.
So that's great.
And to give you a little background on it, it was raised about 3% for 2 years. It hasn't been raised in 5 years. We're going on our
Predates
6th
me.
year.
I've been here 6, and it
We're going on our
hasn't been
6th year.
raised.
It's never been raised. We're looking at an 18% raise in terms of what we need to do, which is 3% for 6 years. So what that tells you is we should have been.
but there's a priority list of sewer projects. This is number one, township shares in that expense.
That's correct.
There's a couple of projects. So this would be is a high-ranking, not true emergency project. The ones I just listed to you, I have ranked higher because they are actual emergencies. They are lines that are failing or are exposed in a stream. But this is a great project.
Okay, and then the laterals. Isn't there, when sewer mains are replaced, isn't there a precedent or a law as to what happens with the laterals?
So by rights, and just to comment on Commissioner Clark's, some townships, when they do a sewer project like this, they may or may not replace those laterals. From my standpoint, from my professional opinion, I think they should be replaced. We're spending a great deal of money to have this line upgraded with airtight, watertight PVC pipe, and yet we'd still have a 100-year-old lateral in some cases that connects to it. But there's a host of issues with replacing that lateral. So by saying that, from a project management standpoint, we really, really complicate the project. Not just from what happens on your property or your property, going through that stone arch culvert. So one of the reasons why we had the line in its original spot was twofold. We knew there was no utility conflict because the line was already in place. Secondly, we could reconnect the laterals relatively easily because they were right there. Once you move the pipe, that all changes. The grade changes, where the lateral gets hooked up, the angle, and if it may go through the culvert or not. So they were two things that were taken into consideration.
Right, and then Luke, is that going to be contentious, the laterals with the rest of the township? Because
I don't know. I mean, the question may be, well, if we're doing them there, we should do them, everywhere else, and that's a fair question.
Right.
I mean, I would be opposed if you're going to do it. If we're going to do it, we need to do the whole thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right. We shouldn't change any
yeah.
portions of this.
And for individual homeowners to attempt it, it's uncoordinated. It's never going to work.
If you leave it up to the home, yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I want to do it from the home to the street and the main.
I think you get a unanimous vote from everyone on Midland Avenue that we're behind.
Oh, I'm pretty
Well,
sure.
the
I'm pretty sure everybody supports that. I don't.
All right, that's all
I don't think I need to
Thank
pull
you.
everybody.
That was a
out.
line of questions. Roger brought up a good distinction, and I think we discussed this at the last meeting. So when we look at the laterals, we could connect the lateral at the pipe, and we call it a day. In a lot of townships, they go back to the right-of-way line, and that's it. And that would
Can
be.
you, Steve? Can you tell them where the right-of-way line
Oh,
is?
okay, I'm sorry. So every road has a different right-of-way, or many have different, and Roger has it marked here. So what would occur if we went with that route, we would run a new lateral back to, like, say, behind the sidewalk. We would stake out the right-of-way. We would put a trap there and connect your sewer into that. So you'd have a new sewer to that point, a new lateral soil pipe, but what went back to your house would be the same. So that does two things. It's an upgrade to what's there, and it also means we're not going, I don't know where your laterals come out of your houses. Patios could have been, I'll give you my house, for example. I have a deck over where my lateral leaves the house. So unless there's a really, really, really tiny plumber, I'm in big trouble. Either that or we're tearing up the deck. So I don't know, it could come out under a porch, it could come out on the side, around back. So that is a mid-step. Yes, ma'am.
So to your point, will you change the location where the lateral is? In other words, my lateral comes out in the front right part of my house, goes then cuts and goes straight down the 3/4 of my driveway, in the middle of my driveway with a vent pipe, the end of my driveway, and then out to the street. So since mine's with driveway on top, would you readjust it and put it to grass?
So what we would look at, again, so this is a policy decision by the board of how these laterals, would we connect it at the pipe? Would we take it to the right of way? Or would we take it back? On a situation like that, I would look at it and take Roger, we would review it and would say, okay, for the same or less cost, can I avoid tearing up your driveway and having to fix your driveway by running it 5 feet over? But the grades have to work. You know, we would abandon, the pipe in place. That could be a similar situation for a lot. If it comes out under what's a stone porch and then runs under a sidewalk, that's very expensive to replace. If there is a way to do that and avoid that, that'd be great. I wouldn't anticipate us doing a lot of machinations back where your sewer leaves the house, it leaves the house, right? That wouldn't change. Back, front, side. Yes, sir.
Provided that the budget goes through, it's passed, when is the prospective start date of this project?
So the commissioners are elected officials. They approve a budget. They can change when this project would start. So Gannett Fleming's done a banner job here on this, but there's still these unanswered questions. So it would be a matter of taking this. Let's say that the plan was not to replace laterals, that we're just going to reconnect them. It's a matter of Gannett Fleming finalizing this, preparing the bidding documents, and going to bid, and that can be a matter of months. If we're going to address the laterals, that's a lot more tedious detail from a design standpoint. That's, we'd be walking around, walking through every yard, noting what's going on. So it's somewhat, I don't mean to.
If you had to crystal ball it, and funding goes through, you get the lateral thing, are we talking March of 2018? Are we talking November 2018?
My hope, the talks were in summer.
Next summer.
So, yeah.
I think that's realistic.
So that would be the hope. It's government, as I've learned. There's a long process. Please don't hold me to that.
Not asking to put your feet in concrete.
And you never know what we're going to find, because this is so old. That's the other thing.
Okay. And what
that's
is
why we have a contingency.
And what is the expected duration
of the project?
Yes.
Probably 2 months of actual digging and disturbance, 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Depending on weather, depending on what we find when we get out there and start moving things around. Just to the lady's point there about moving a lateral, you don't know what you hit when you go to do that, and other utility conflicts. We know the pipe works where it is.
Yeah,
we don't know that it's going to work where it
had windows replaced.
And I anticipate when the crews are out digging, I'm going to get a call, and they're going to say, Steve, we're near the storm sewer pipe, but it's all cracked and it's done.
Okay.
So then I'm going to go back and say, I can't not fix this, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, conservatively, I would say 3 months or so until you're buttoned up and the paving starts again.
So you start 1 month, you come east, down Midland,
They would work,
it's a
yes.
month. All of a sudden you get to my house at 300 Midland on the corner of Aberdeen, and you start there and you start digging. And how long are we without toilets? Flow through, I'll call it, whatever.
It'll be reconnected every day.
It'll be reconnected every day.
And what would it be? It'd be like a 9 to 3 type thing?
You may be, depending on, the contractor pretty much decides that on what his work plan's going to be.
Sure.
We'll work with him. You'll all get notices that'll say, hey, today we're cutting your lateral off.
Yeah.
And
Please don't flush.
yes, you would have a window. It would not be it would not be more than a few hours. It certainly wouldn't be overnight. They would put a temporary reconnection back on so that you wouldn't be without service. It may just be a couple of hour inconvenience, and even that they'll ask you like not to do laundry or something, so you don't fill the trench up on them.
It behooves them to get that because they're working in a trench and they don't want your dishwasher or your tub dumping all this water, in amongst their work area.
And technically, any discharge from a sanitary sewer outside of the sanitary sewer is a violation of the Clean Water Act.
Okay.
So if you you
Sure.
fire up your dishwasher and it runs into the trench, that's technically a violation of the Clean Water Act. So we-
And
we
I
need
have
to
a lot
protect
more
against
questions,
that.
but I'll ask just one more and I'll give the floor back and come back at you. This fall, St. Catherine's rerouted all of the pickup process and the drop-off process for students with absolutely no notification to anyone in the neighborhood. And being at 300 Midland, it drastically affects us every day, and residents on the other side of us. There was no notification whatsoever by the school to residents. So will you be working with the school on the routing?
We coordinate with the school district and any other local schools or daycares that would be in the area to make them aware of what we're doing, find out what their patterns are, and then we'll work with the contractor and with the school to determine what's the best way to keep that going and not affect everybody.
And that includes the Radnor Township School District, St. Catherine's, because we have to talk to their transportation department for the, the early pickup for the senior high, the later pickup for the middle school, and the later pickup for the elementary school.
That also goes to emergency
I was
services
gonna
too.
say,
We also
volunteer
coordinate with the
firefighters,
police and the fire department when any construction's going on, so that they're aware what's going on and make alternate routes.
So what's the estimated cost? Do we have one?
What I have in the budget, so I think I have 1.2 or 3, I don't recall, and that's based on some big unknowns.
That's no laterals.
So what would occur if the board gives us marching orders one way or the other? I'd ask Gannett to give us a revised price. That would be reflected in the budget. I will add a contingency to that for the what-ifs. And honestly, in a 100-year-old neighborhood, there are going to be several what-ifs. This isn't supposed to be here. Why is it here? Or it's supposed to be here and it's not. So we're going to have some of them. So we'll get a much better estimated probable cost of construction once we get some final marching orders from the board. It's put it this way, for magnitude, it's over $1 million project.
But then the lateral component, you're not including that in that number?
I have a number in the budget that's not taking it all the way back to the house, so I don't.
My recollection, it was 800 without the laterals, and it was over $1 million with the laterals.
Yeah.
When you're saying laterals to the vent stacks, not laterals to the
Well,
house.
there's 3 options.
There's
Thank
3
you.
options.
Right, we talked about this. Just hook it up at the pipe.
The initial estimate that they were talking about just goes to the vent stack or to the right-of-way line.
Right.
There's been subsequent talk about going all the way to the house.
Right.
Which obviously is substantially more.
Sure,
Yeah.
okay, thanks.
So in sewer and terminology, the lateral goes from the pipe to the right-of-way line. From the right-of-way line to the house is called a building sewer. It's kind of
And that goes to the
semantics,
vet.
but code books refer to the 2 different things, so.
And I should tell you folks, these little dots are microphones, so the camera comes this way, but they're very, very sensitive. So if you're mumbling about Norsini being a, you know what, it does get picked up. And,
He's a heck of a guy.
so tomorrow, this will be on YouTube, on the township site, so it's not a live recording, it's videotaped, and then the IT folks will do that.
When does this go out for a proposal? When would this go out for a proposal?
Right, so if the board approves it in this year's budget for next year, conceivably, the January meeting, I would go to the Board of Commissioners and request authorization to receive bids. The project gets bid, as Commissioner talked about, this is the local government, so we have a very strict procedure of how we get our bids. They're sealed bids, they're prevailing wages, so it's not like calling up a contractor and saying, hey, here's some plans, give us a price. It's a very set process. Yes, ma'am.
I live in the 300 block, and annually we have to have Roto-Rooter or electric service come and clean us out between the that thing that sticks up in the yard.
Vent, yes.
They say that the problem there is because the pitch isn't steep enough. So my question is, are you going to bury the pipe lower than it's currently buried?
So there's a what if, and so we have a fixed elevation, right? Where your pipe leaves the house to where our sewer pipe is. So we'd have to take a look and see if that can be addressed. I don't know why your specific lateral is that way. Was it built that way? Was it repaired that way? And that's one of those things, like, if
We're
we,
the lowest
Right.
point.
You know.
But my question is, are you going to bury the sewer pipe, the sewer line in the middle of the street?
In the 300
Deeper.
block, a little bit, and I know that sounds ambiguous, but a little bit because we're relocating that away from the trees, and it has to go a little bit lower. But we're very much limited to how far down we can go because of, you know, we have to hit a point where we're leaving Midland,
Correct.
connecting into the existing system, and you know, so the initial intention was putting it back exactly where it was, knowing that all the grades work. This would be one of the specific items that, you know, let Steve know, and we can take a look at it and see if there's something we can do there to get you a little bit more. It won't be substantial, but if we can get you a little bit more.
Steve, two questions. Two things. One, what's happening with the sidewalks and the curbs and the street? We're not, I mean, after all this is done is when Midland's finally going to get paved, right? I mean, goodness knows we shouldn't do it before this, but.
That's why Midland has been patched all these
Yes.
last few years.
Thank you.
Because it was anticipated that some project of some sort was going to occur, whether it be sanitary or storm or both.
Mhm.
So this project would repair or replace anything within the project limits. The intent would be to resurface the entire street from curb to curb.
Mhm.
If we did lateral work and it went through a sidewalk block or blocks, that would be replaced. But it not included is, you know, new sidewalks
Okay.
and all that.
Okay, and obviously the pitch is going to change because if you're moving the line away from one house and closer to the others, so, okay, so as homeowners, is there anything we should or should not be doing in the next 4 to 6 months while you guys are, you know, seeing if the Board of Commissioners passes the budget, makes a decision on what they're doing about laterals, and if it's going to be laterals to construction or laterals to the vents or laterals to the house, I mean, and then until they bid the project, is there anything we should or shouldn't do that's going to make this, you know, a waste of money on our part, good preparation for this project? What's kind of the best?
It's
Don't
somewhat,
plant fancy trees over your
Yeah.
lateral.
Okay.
and if your
Yeah.
lateral, so again, it really depends on how the commissioners, there's a lot of options of how they could do this whole lateral thing. So, I mean, if your lateral's in bad shape and you have to replace it, you repair it. But if you're able to operate fine and wait to see what happens here, some folks try to be proactive. I get a letter from Aqua, Pennsylvania every month on insurance for my sanitary lateral. And, you know, what it would cost. And, oh, by the way, they'll replace my lateral proactively. So, you know, some folks want to look at it that way. I would not do anything proactive till this project was determined.
Okay.
Obviously, if you have an issue with your lateral, since we don't know what the limit will be, you need to fix it. If we do go to the right-of-way line and you have an issue between there and the pipe, then that would get fixed within the project limits.
And then if it turns out that the commissioners don't decide to pick up the cost for the laterals, which I think they should, I think that just needs to be part of the cost of doing business in our town, but that's me. Please tell me you guys are going to help us get like a group rate or something like that.
That could be
because-
an option.
Okay.
What I will tell you, though, this project will be bid prevailing wages.
Uh-huh.
So that's a state mandate.
All right. So,
So
we might
a
be better.
laborer on this project will make $70-some an hour when benefits are factored in.
Okay.
Whereas if you call the local plumber, when it's
Or-
all said and done, scale or not, I'm going to guess that you're going to get a cheaper price.
Okay. All right.
Because they're not paying $70 an hour.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Steve, I'd like to add my thanks for the moving the line on the 300 block into the street. That's a big improvement. I really appreciate that. I think all the residents do. Couple of comments. The arborist has one of my trees going, and I see from the plan, it appears that the reason for that is he thinks my lateral goes out where that tree is.
What number, sir?
320.
So I'm looking at 320. We have a smoke tree. And were you the gentleman who sent the emael?
Yeah, they're not
Yes.
smoke trees.
You're
I'm
correct.
very sorry about
He
your
did
arborist.
concur.
He doesn't know my tree.
He concurred. So we have a smoke tree, a crabapple, and another smoke tree.
Yeah.
So
He
he's saying,
thinks the lateral goes underneath one of those, what he calls smoke trees were actually plums. But like you said earlier, Steve, and I'm confirming it, my lateral goes in a corkscrew across the yard. I know where it goes. I've had it pressure washed a couple of times, and I've had it cambered. And they say it's in good shape, but it doesn't go in a straight line. My question to you is, if we decide to go through with the laterals, can you and I agree that it should go in a straight line and put it straight from the house? Because I think not only would it be better for flow, it would also avoid having to go through another tree.
we would concur with that.
Thank you, sir.
The microphone's on, you know.
Yes. So I heard somebody mumbling right now.
And I forgive him for calling it a smoke tree. But
I actually, so he was in Montana, and I get this email that says, sorry, you know, I have limited access. So I guess when he got on the plane today, all the emails came in. So he called me right away, and he apologized, and he said he was more concerned about the trees, but that you were definitely correct. It is not a smoke tree.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Steve, peripherally, what happens to our services during this time, like trash and
Trash would not stop, so that's part of what Roger was saying. So when we do these projects, we look at it universally, whether it be transportation for students, whatever school, private, parochial, public, emergency services, police, fire, ambulance, as well as our guys, the trash guys. So we would tell them, hey, you are allowed down that road. So we would make sure that they come, and the contractor would know that. And Roger builds these things into the contract so that it's not just, hey, this road's shut down, nobody comes down here for 8 or 9 hours.
You'll have access to your houses, and local traffic will be permitted. The contractor will be instructed to have a certain part of the road open where you can access your properties. Emergency services will be able to access your properties. And at the end of the day, when the contractor leaves, they'll button things up, they'll steel plate the trench, make sure everything's safe and buttoned up before they go. So you'll have access. You may be inconvenienced, you may have 15 minutes, a half hour, 2 hours during the day where you might have to park up the street and walk in or something, but for the most part, you'll have full access to your houses. If they're digging up your driveway, obviously that's going to be an inconvenience. But again, at the end of the day, everything will be buttoned up.
You know, to Roger's point, so on King of Prussia Road, where we have this emergency project, we have temporary pipe that runs under maybe a dozen driveways. So as we're removing that pipe right now, as soon as they pull it, they put a plate down so you can get in and out. So for that 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and we'll go knock on the door and say, hey, are you coming out? You know, now would be the time to come out. That plate goes down, they do what they're doing, pull the plate, and get temporary restoration back for you to get in. Yes, ma'am.
A tree question. Why are some of the trees removed and some of them are removed and replaced?
So part of it is based on their, so when Hosback, John Rockwell Hosback, our township appointed arborist, when he went through, he's looking at the trees for a couple things. What is their condition standalone? Just what's their condition? That's where the hazard tree comes into play. What, if you go to the second page, it says, okay, here's the condition of the tree as it stands now. And would you like me to do your property specifically?
Sure, although we only have 300 Midland.
Okay.
One is another, one is just removed.
So we have a Zelkova and a Zelkova. And he's saying, you know, the condition is fair as it stands today. Is there a conflict? None for one, yes for the other. So he's saying with the conflict, that conflict means that tree should be removed in his opinion. Whereas the other one, there is not a conflict, but he's saying we should monitor it. And so that's the methodology he used. He went out, looked at the tree where it stands, put down its condition. I reviewed these plans with him. He had these plans. He had a couple of his arborists with him. They were in the street, and he called me and he said, Steve, you know, how are they going to do this project? Well, they're going to excavate. I said, you know, they're going to use a trench box. Let's assume worst case scenario, maybe it's 5 or 6 feet wide when it's all said and done. And that's what he looks at for the impact on the tree, based on the drip line, where it is in the street, how much of it's on the property. Just to give you an example, we were looking at another project, and I'm walking it with him, and there's a huge tree right on the curb line. I'm like, oh geez, I guess that thing's gonna have to go. He's like, no, not necessarily. Some of the trees, because of the street, the root structure goes the other way. So that tree, which I thought would have to come down, was a monitor, whereas he's looking at that specifically and saying, too much impact from the project, that would have to be removed.
Okay, so but why are some removed and some remove and replace? So why wouldn't that be replaced?
If we remove it, it will be replaced.
Okay, so even though it just says remove, it's...
Some of it is, so when he says remove and replace, I think sometimes he swings into our ordinance. What I would tell you is, after talking to the manager and the commissioner, we remove a tree, something's going back in accordance with our ordinance. And the only problem that may occur is, so our ordinance is based on diameter at breast height. So if you remove a certain size tree, so our heritage tree gets 6 compensatory planting trees. There's not always enough road frontage to put them in, but we would work that out with you.
The only one that wouldn't be replaced is if it was being removed because it was right on top of your lateral. Right. So we wouldn't put that back in. Because I'm sure with some of the locations of the laterals, I'm sure there's a lot of root problems in the laterals now.
Vitrified clay pipe loves tree roots, or I should say tree roots love vitrified clay pipe.
So there's a whole bunch of monitors here. Do you guys have a contingency plan? Are you watching them? If they do die or from the construction, will they be replaced?
So the monitor is having Hosback or someone from his firm during construction to look at those roots. What we've done in the past, let's say that they're trenching past a house with a tree, which we hoped would be just monitor. And maybe when they see that the root damage was more extensive than anticipated, or the root structure was not as healthy as they thought, they will call me and say, Steve, this is going to have to come down. At that point, we would go back to the homeowner and say, unforeseen, so we do have to take this tree down. And again, so I'm not talking for the commissioners or the manager. My assumption is we're going to make things right. I have said to people, when we do a project, my goal is to make wherever we went better than it was. So we did a project on the south end of the township. Gannett Fleming designed it. When we were done, the yards looked great. There was some people got expanded backyards. We planted trees. We got rid of undergrowth trees. So when it was all said and done, it looked really nice. The only evidence that we were there, every once in a while, you saw a manhole frame. So our intent, this is a little different because we're in the front yards. Our intent, when we're done here, you have a brand new paved road. Any trees that were removed would be replaced in some fashion. And our intent would be, when we're done, you'd say, great, our place looks wonderful. Now, I can't replace a 30-inch tree, but I can replace it with smaller trees. Yes, ma'am.
I'm at 301 Midland, where Aberdeen goes up our side yard. Is that, from what I can see on the plan, is it going to take our whole sidewalk?
No. I think you're talking about trees.
Backing up to the gas station, right?
Yeah, I back up to the gas station.
Yep.
So that's a replace in kind. Yeah, and it's not a problem. That sidewalk, like I said, if our project damages curb or sidewalk, you get a brand new sidewalk out.
And our fence is very close to the sidewalk. Is that going to impact our fence at all?
So that would be a question I would ask the commissioner. So by rights, anything within the township right-of-way shouldn't be there. And that doesn't mean, let me tell you, it's all over the township. There's fences, there's planting mounds, there's brick planters, there's things, because the right-of-way is supposed to be used, one of the things for is either utilities or a public works project. So the thought is the township shouldn't have to pay to remove things that shouldn't be there. That's not my call. So my thought would be we would talk to the commissioners and say, in these instances, would you want us to remove the fence, put it back up? I tell people this all the time. So we have easements with sanitary sewer that go through backyards. Invariably, every once in a while, there's a problem. So I go back there, and on top of the sewer is a shed, a playground, an above-ground pool, and it's all on top of the sewer. And so we have to dig this sewer up. So by rights, if this was an emergency, the removal of them would be with a large machine, pushing it out of the way. If we have time, we say, hey folks, look, we have an easement agreement, could you get these things moved so we can go? So that would be a call. I would anticipate that, our commissioners, obviously Commissioner Clark's manager, they're here to talk to you. These are all issues. In the scheme of a project that's 6-7 figures, in my personal opinion, moving a fence and putting it back. Now the problem that happens is when it's an old fence and we move it and it's in pieces, then there's a bigger issue. Who's buying the new fence?
Well, and would they have issued a permit for it if it wasn't supposed to be there in the first place?
So if you called now to get a fence permit, it's not my quote department, but they would tell you no if it was in the right of way. But like I said, for years and years, there's sheds all over the township that shouldn't be, and that's not just here, this is all over the country, all over southeastern Pennsylvania. I bought my house, my shed's not in the right spot.
Right.
I'm going to tell you the person didn't get a permit. There's trees that are planted in the right of way that necessarily shouldn't be there. You'll see driveways in some homes that have very large and ornate brick wing walls that really shouldn't be there. So I think that's the fact that we'd be redoing the sidewalk, I don't think the fence is a huge issue.
And typically, once we settle on the low bidder or the contract is awarded, we will walk the entire project with the contractor and identify scenarios just like that. And they'll say to us, well, I have a small machine, I can get in here and do that, not disturb it, or my machine's gonna be big, it's gotta come out, we'll just put a new one in. So there's a lot of that gets worked out with the contractor once they're on board too.
And we're going to videotape, so we do a pre-construction videotape. The whole site is walked, so that way when you call and say, Steve, my sidewalk block is cracked, it wasn't cracked, and the contractor says, oh, I don't think I did anything, we go to the videotape. But also to Roger's point, we have a pre-bid meeting. That's where the contractor have had a chance to review the plans and go look at the site, and they bring these things up to us.
Yeah.
And they'll say, there's no way I can do this with that fence there. What's that going to be? So, very valuable meeting. We might put a line item in there, remove and replace fence.
They may also, it's been my experience at times that contractors will come to the homeowner and say, look, your fence is a little too close to where I'm working. It's going to take me too long to mess around with it. I'm taking it down. What kind of fence do you want? Let's go down to Lowe's and pick one out, and they give you that. So they can also have the freedom to work their own deals on their own when they're on the private side of the property. So there's a lot of different scenarios. So we consider that and we look at that before the job starts.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you're going to replace the sidewalk.
Yes, sir.
Steve, you briefly mentioned the culvert behind our house at 300 Midland that comes from St. Catherine's through behind our property. I think most of us are well aware of the danger that it presents and the tragedy that happened in 2011 behind our house. I talked to you in the spring of 2016 about it. At the time, you told me, Townships told me not to talk to you about it.
No, actually, my reply was, I was told by our attorney, it's not our culvert.
Okay.
That's appropriate.
But you brought it up now in terms of the culvert. Is something finally going to be done, and this is for Commissioner Clark as well, is something finally going to be done about the danger that culvert poses back there?
Not to dismiss your question, tonight and this project is all about sanitary sewer. It has nothing to do with any storm sewer projects or storm sewer conveyance. So I can tell you that.
Okay.
We're strictly talking about.
But you did mention the culvert at one point.
Because some of your lateral pipes run through it.
Okay.
For that reason specifically, but not to do anything to it, other than if we have to replace a lateral that runs through the culvert. But it has nothing to do with the culvert per se. This is strictly a sanitary sewer replacement project on Midland Avenue from Luella to St. David's, and on Luella from Windermere to 3rd.
Oh, it's on the well as well.
That's the
And the Aberdeen
CIPP,
part.
the
Got
cured
it.
in place pipe. So
Oh, right, the thing, yeah, the fiberglass. Got it.
That was Susan's idea.
Yeah, mine.
does a very good job on the planning commission, so she's probably coming to our side.
Well, I gotta go.
Bye,
but
Mark.
Thank you. I think it's a
folks-
great job. I mean,
Yeah,
really.
thank you very much.
Folks, if you want to, if you have any questions, we're here to go in this format. If you want to come up and ask us anything specific, as you see, as it may affect your house, please do.
I used to be. I did.
Oh, I didn't know.